So kick this off. Date is December 7th, 2017. This is just a high-level design discussion. It doesn't have anything to do with the build that we're currently working on. I just want to talk about some of the stuff so that we can be thinking about ways that we can be potentially ironing these issues out and coming up with better ideas for things. And also to help me get a better idea, because as we get into January, I got to create we'll do a crafting design discussion later on, but I'm going to have to start creating a better master design document, because as we bring all these contractors on, they need a master document that they can go to, which defines all of these things. So we need to start having once a week design discussions like this. We can do them whenever people are available, but we're going to have to do these once a week. So I just wanted to get this kicked off with this week's session. So the last basically month, I guess, I've been doing these Mondays in MMORPGs, blog posts and video. No, not videos. They're not even podcasts, really. They're just audio. They're not even a podcast. It's just an audio thing. I would like to eventually transfer those over to a podcast format, but we'll get there later. In the meantime, I've been trying to pick topics that I knew were controversial because I knew it would get eyes on us. It's been very successful in that regard. We've generated quite a few new pre-orders from that. We've done a couple more pre-orders in the last couple of days. We did a chunk of pre-orders last month. We had a $2,500 pre-order like about a week ago. So that's all coming together. That's great. However, in the course of this discussion, I've literally been reading hundreds. It's probably well over 1,500 comments by this point, if you factor in all four of the posts that have been picked up by multiple media outlets. Obviously, when you're dealing with these media outlets, you have to just recognize the fact that the vast majority of these people are dipshit douchebags. But in between every 15, 20 dipshit douchebag comments, you'll find 2 or 3 that are really good and have some good information and ways of thinking about things that maybe we haven't considered before, maybe that I haven't considered before. So one thing we have to realize is that at some point we're going to have to compromise on some of the concepts that we have, not in the sense that we're bowing down to the wishes of people, but we have to face the reality that we're taking money. We just took a huge chunk of money from people. We need our game to be as successful as possible. It's great to say we don't give a shit about the masses. We want to be a niche product. That's fine. But if we make it too niche, we won't get any subscribers. And we really need to make sure that we at least can get 10, 15,000 subscribers if we really want to make this into an economic.
I'd just like to point out that your CTO has been saying that for like a year now. Just saying. No.
So I want to talk about, there's 2 things in particular that have really sparked a lot of conversations, to the point where Massively's, which I don't like Massively because they don't like me, and they're just, Justin and Bree have a huge chip on their shoulder about me from like 3 years ago when Bree told everybody that I was shitting on the MMORPG community. And since then, they've continued. They keep picking up on all of our stuff and publishing it, but every time they do, they make really snide, nasty comments about us.
Did you say Bree?
Bree, B-R-E-E.
Is this a woman?
Yes.
Did she used to play EverQuest?
I don't know.
Is there any way to find out? Does she live in Atlanta?
I don't know.
The only reason I ask is because one of my first guild, the Mercenaries of Doom, had a cleric named Bree who I wasn't like good friends with, but like I was, it was a very small, tight-knit guild.
Angelos would know more because he deals with them more than I do. But
I could reach out and bridge the gap.
He doesn't care for her. Nobody really cares for her. She's kind of a psycho nut job.
This could be
their latest. So
which site is this again? I'm sorry.
Massively OP. It's the editor-in-chief. She's the head of everything. Bree Olson, I think is her name, or Bree something. Anyway, let's not diverge too far off track. So I did the No Minimaps post, which turned out to be one of their hottest posts of the last month. The last time I checked, it had like 155 comments on it. It was so popular that they made a follow-up post about inconvenience in MMORPGs, and then they made a follow-up podcast episode 2 or 3 days ago, specifically targeting me and our design decisions about mini maps and the looking for group system, or the lack of a looking for group system. Now, I say all of this because I don't agree with anything that they are saying, but in having gone through hundreds of comments on all of the posts that they're publishing in relation to what we're building, and also what's been going on at mmorpg.com, there's been a lot of people who are talking about things that we need to consider. So let's just run down the list. First and foremost, and we kind of already talked about this the other day, we've always said that we were going to have third person in the game as an ability, as a mastery related to, one is intelligence based, the astral projection, the other one is perception. We've already discussed that has to be a priority for the first builds coming out in 2018, because I can't, having seen all the commentary from all of these sites over the last few weeks, I can tell you right off the bat, I think we've lost, at least in the last year or two, I think we've lost over 30 pre-orders from people who have said, oh, you're only first person, I'm not going to buy a first person game. We're not only a first person, but the perception is that we are. Because I made a blog post like 3 years ago talking about we are a primary first person, even though that blog post is all about the fact that we have third person as an ability, but none of our videos show it. We've not shown any screenshots that show it. And so as a result, we're getting a lot of pushback from people who are like, well, fuck you, you're not third person, I'm not going to buy your game. No, we're not third person. We are a primary first person, but we do have third person in there. So that's something that I already talked with Robert recently about. We're going to be pushing that live as quickly as possible with some of the upcoming combat changes, or combat work that we're doing, not changes per se. The next topic of that, and this is where I want to have everybody thinking about this from a high level. We don't have to make decisions right now, but I want everybody to be thinking about this and being creative in their minds. And then as we have these ongoing discussions, we will continue to address these issues. So first and foremost, we've talked a lot about, we're not going to have a looking for group automatic dungeon finder where it teleports you to the zone, or etc. We've talked about using this bulletin board system, which is going to take place in the local taverns. And then people will use those to form up groups in a local environment. Now, on a basic level, we can look at that and say that's what we want, because that's what we think is cool. I've looked at a lot of commentary now, and I'm ignoring the people who are like, fuck that shit, I need my group finder, I want to have automatic teleportation. I'm ignoring all those people, and I've been reading comments from people who are like, you know what? Here's the issues with that. Here are the good things with that. Here's the bad things with that. So people have brought up the original group finder in World of Warcraft before they added teleportation. I think it was something to do with stones. I didn't play vanilla Warcraft, so I'm not exactly sure how this worked, but apparently
it was a summoning stone. So what happened is, if you went to a dungeon, as long as you had two people there, you could actually summon the other members of the group to the stone. But you had to have two people at the stone, which was right outside the dungeon.
Okay.
And it might have been even 3 people. I don't remember because it's been so long.
Similar thing in Lotro as well. Sorry, Gio, go ahead.
Yeah, I said other than that, you were shouting in chat pretty much.
Right. So the biggest feedback I've seen from everyone, even the people who have, again, ignoring all the naysayers and all the dipshits, looking at the people who have given positive feedback and said, you know, that sounds kind of cool, but here's some issues we see. The number one issue that everyone keeps coming back to me with is, let's say you put this bulletin board system in the taverns. What's going to happen to the tavern then is that, and we don't know that this is the case, but I'm objectively looking at this. People then come to the taverns, they enter into the tavern, they put their information up on the bulletin board, and then they start spamming the local say or the OOC for the tavern, trying to sell their gear. So instead of trying to, role play or anything else, you get all these spammers that are in there just trying to sell shit, and etc. That will probably happen. We just, unless we somehow come up with a creative way to make sure that people, but this is the thing, if we aren't giving people an auction house, and we're asking people to create their own environment to go sell in, like the Commons Tunnel. People are going to end up gravitating towards that tavern if that's where they're already going to be going to put up their information on a bulletin board system. So then that, our concept of, hey, this tavern is going to be a cool place to come role play and socialize and find people for your group and everything else. There's the potential for that to become just a spam bot place where people just come in and spam for trying to sell stuff and etc. So there's some negative downsides I can see to the concept that we've had, and I'd like to come up with what are some creative solutions, because I do, with removing the element of fast travel, at some point we will have some components of fast travel available. I don't anticipate them being in the early stages of the game, but I've always had in my mind that as players unlock the different parts of the world, they're going to come across old, like think of them as wizard spires. And we've had discussions about this before, about maybe we tie these into global events where, in order for players to unlock the portal in this zone, the whole server has to come together and complete a server event, and then boom, now they have this portal that they can access, and then as magic comes back to the realm, it can then be used on a more regular basis. But that's only a limited amount of fast travel in between very specific points of the world. How do we deal with, obviously,
this was a huge problem Vanguard had as well, and
right.
You saw what they did with their, all the stuff with the early iterations of it, where they were like, oh, you got to have these crystals and this certain currency and shit like that, and it just failed miserably, probably because no one played the game, but there were other reasons as well.
So, I mean, as far as fast travel, I know that we have talked previously in the past about some type of like bird system, and I think that we should now start crafting some type of guild of people who train like giant birds or something, so that when we have to do something that's not like an automatic group finder, but if we're going to lean that direction, have something where you go to a certain spot, there's something that you have to do, and a giant bird comes and grabs you by your shoulders and you get a loading screen. And then you're somewhere else. Now, we could do this limited, like, for main dungeons, where there's going to be a lot of funneling to, and it would still be cool, and it would not be, like, all over the place, but you're essentially doing that kind of that vanilla WoW thing, but it's part of the game. It's cool. It doesn't even need to be flying things, but there could be ways that, we do fast travel to get people together to go and do what they need to do. However, from that point, I don't know what they do to get back. Now, I had always thought that we're doing some type of consignment merchant in a town, like there's a bunch of vendor stalls or whatever. The player can either just, shout and trade by themselves. But I had always thought that we would have, a vendor that maybe he goes and talks to. You pay them rent, maybe like you do houses in EverQuest, and they work for you, and you hand them items, and you set a price, and people can come locally to buy those items, to sell their own items, and then you go back and check with them, and they give you whatever money for stuff that they've sold. Now, I think that makes the most sense in the way that we're doing things with local economies, and not having to make, like, the players sit there and shout all day long. We don't have players camping and making their own little shops like you see in some of, like, the Korean RPGs, where the town is just flooded with people standing there with their own little shops. We could just have a few market stalls where people are there, and you go and talk to them and provide your items. You set a price.
Well, I think we need to rein this in, because we're I'm not even sure where we're at anymore. We're just going off on a tangent. I mean, I understand where you started, but like.
Well, he had said something about, selling, or we had.
Right, I understand. And like I said, I'm just saying, I think we're off track of the point of what we were talking about.
So I think that
right?
the consignment, I've written down a note about the consignment because I know we talked about it before. So that's something we can look at in order to try to keep people out of the tavern and selling. There's still going to be people that want to sell there. I was just looking, but we can try to keep the majority of them out of that. I just brought that up as a potential
request for some guild of people who train giant flying creatures. That
right. Let's hang on a second though.
I mean,
I would be more inclined. So what I'm looking at right now is I'm going to come back to that here in a second. I'm going to come back to the fast travel thing here in a second. Looking at okay, the concept that we have for looking for group is you're in a local environment, whether it's a city or an outpost. You go to the tavern. There's a bulletin board. I know Path of Exile does this. Ashes of Creation just announced that they're going to be doing a similar system about 2 weeks ago. So we can also look at how they're doing it. But in my mind, I always envision it as you go into the tavern. There's a bulletin board. Guilds can put up a notice that they're looking for other players. Yep. Players can post a notice that they're looking for a guild. Players can post a notice that they're looking for a group, and groups can post a notice that they're looking for other people. That's great. That's a great way to get people into one place,
right?
To get them to want to socialize and to get them to come together in one environment. But it doesn't solve the issue with, and this is something that somebody brought up. That only works to a limited degree if we're only reliant upon local chat. Now, we don't have global chat, which is great. We're not going to have global channels, so it's going to be local. You need to be in that local environment to find a group for that local. And I don't think that having a zone-wide OOC is going to detract from that, because you want to be able to be in your zone and just right outside of the city. Hey, is anybody here that wants to join me? You know, blah blah blah. I don't think that takes away, but the bulletin board only works if we don't have global chat channels, which we don't, so I think we're okay there. But the issue that I can see is, and this is something that people keep coming back to, is how do we facilitate in terms of the long-term longevity of this project, how do we facilitate players coming together? We've talked about an offline app. It's great to talk about that. It's great to theorize about that. But what does that really look like in terms of having an offline app that you can load onto your phone, and it allows you to tap into that bulletin board system to meet other people and to set up groups for specific times and find other people? That's all well and good. It still doesn't solve our number one issue, and this is the number one thing that I see everybody bitching about is, and I keep coming back. My argument to these people is always, well, you don't have a problem setting up a tabletop session. Why should you have a problem setting up a dungeon group? It doesn't, you're sitting down to do something for 2 to 3 hours. You're not just coming to play our game for, well, you're not going to go to a dungeon if you're only playing for 30 minutes. If you're only playing 30 minutes, you're going to run outside the city walls and you're going to kill bears for, 20, 30 minutes with your friend. Maybe you do it on your own if you have some decent gear and they're slightly below you in level. But if you're going to go do a dungeon, it's going to be a commitment. But the number one thing I'm seeing people complain about, both sides of the fence, is how do we facilitate the person that doesn't want to spend an hour of their time looking for a group? Now, my argument has always been, I've never had to deal with that. But I am a social, outgoing person, and if I can't get a group going in-game, I go to the forums, I do whatever I need to do to make a group happen. Just like the group that we're doing right now, this EverQuest stuff. It started off, there was only 4 of us. I couldn't get anybody in, so I went to Reddit. I went to Reddit, and that's where I found the Druid, and then it just grew from there, and now we've got like 20-some players playing. I went and I made it happen. Not everyone wants to do that. So how do we make the game accessible? How do we make travel accessible? It's one thing to say, here's the bulletin board, put your name up on the list. What happens if that person then spends 30 minutes looking for a group? They find a group, but then it's going to take them another hour and a half dungeon. So now they can't do that tonight. They got to schedule it for the next session. Maybe it's okay when they have to do that 1 or 2 times, but what happens when they've had to do that 3 or 4 times, and now they don't want to play the game anymore? Because they say, well, fuck this shit. I'm having to spend 60, 80% of my time looking for a group and trying to organize transport. So looking at how World of Warcraft did it, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, where if you have a certain amount of people in the group ready to go, is because looking in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I can conceptualize, and this is me. I birds are one thing. I think that the concept of doing something like that is okay, but I would rather not use birds per se. I would be more akin to, like, for example, playing Final Fantasy right now and looking at these huge crystals. In our game, having these ancient ruins where magic has been gone, the ruins are falling apart, these relics are drained of their power, but maybe there's these individual, call them wizard spires if we want to, that have limited charges left available in them. And if you have a certain amount of people in your group that are ready to go, and you have a scholar, this would be very important, so a wizard in your party who has access to that quote-unquote teleport spell, then you could then transport your group. So this is talking about not just the community bulletin board and looking for group system and the app that we want to develop, but also how do we solve the travel situation? Because in my mind, it's great to say that I want players to have to invest a shitload amount of time and travel for 6 hours to get to a dungeon entrance. But you have to admit that there's only going to be a very small portion of the game community who are going to want to actually dedicate 6 hours to traveling across the community.
Well, that's meant to be
Okay.
part of the adventure. Is that adventure from town to someplace? Now, I know I've been playing a version of Lineage that came out on the phone, and it's pretty easy to pick up and play. One of the things, like, we haven't really talked about is the people who are already out. Maybe they left their dungeon group one night, they log back in, and they're outside of a dungeon. Now, they don't have a bulletin board in a tavern anywhere near them. We need to have some kind of user interface where you can bring up a menu and see the nearby groups and start, pinging them. Or maybe it's set that somebody can auto-join, and you auto-join it, and you say, hey, guys, what are you doing? I see you're nearby. Is there, where are you? Can I get to you? Do you have room for me? Do you have use of my skills? No, okay, sorry, okay, leave, and then talk to somebody else in that list. And not being able to, like, I don't know if that negates the billboard and that you should be able to create groups like that everywhere.
That negates
I don't think it does unless you can only create from the billboard, and it's just picking up stragglers out there. They need to be able to see that you're there beyond just shouting in OOC. Like, I don't have a problem. EverQuest has, like, no tools for it, and look at us, just, like, you see somebody run by and say, hey, do you need a group? Oh, yeah, join in with us. Like, look at our Unrest group tonight. We didn't even try to get that group together. It just happens because that's the way the game is played. People funnel together and help each other. So I know a lot of people just don't understand that type of gameplay, which is great that we get so many new people right now who want to come in and try EverQuest with us because they see what's that like when the game is solely focused around group content. So,
yeah, but you have to remember as well that EverQuest is, coming up 20 years old. Like, those features didn't exist because they probably didn't even know they needed them at the time.
Well, the feeling is still there, and it still works so well. Like,
it doesn't matter. Daybreak exists as a company, not just because of EverQuest. They have plenty of other IPs they can pull money from. Like, the issue I think Tim's trying to get at is, yes, we could make a very niche focused product that is similar to EQ in some aspects of, quote unquote hardcore, old school, whatever we want to call it. But the problem is we're going to be missing out on a very valuable demographic, that there are those middle of the ground people that
I haven't agree with going.
Yeah, and that's what he's trying to bring up and solve is those kind of, like, okay, how can we tap into additional demographics without violating our vision of the game, and how can we work that in? So yes, I think every one of us here is in agreement that, yeah, we shouldn't need to do this stuff, but the fact of the matter is we do. If we want to be successful as a company and attract new players, we need to do something and find some sort of a compromise that actually works for the game and maybe is not as dumbed down and boiled down and as easy as other games, but somehow has that, underlying functionality to allow us to capture those people, because capturing people from the market is difficult. Games are like fucking games at launch have like a 9% success rate or something.
Right.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's.
I don't think it
I know
takes
John.
much to make
Hang on. Let's let John, because John's been trying to speak for like 10 minutes.
So
Let's let him put his thoughts forward real quick.
I want us to keep in mind in this meeting too that like this is an idea meeting. We're not here to solve the problem right now. So like we're gonna throw out ideas and we're gonna think about them for a week, and then we're gonna come back and say, hey, this is let's maybe dig into this idea a little deeper.
So I can say one thing off the top of my head. I don't want to. I'm going to shoot down the idea of allowing people to be out in the wilds and access some sort of a looking for group system, because that negates the whole bulletin board thing.
Yeah, I mean, should
be
people
able to see the groups nearby?
No, they shouldn't. Like, they need to be in a tavern if they want to do that. That's been our concept since day one. If they're out in the wilds and they want to figure out if there's groups going on nearby, do an OOC.
OOC chat.
And if that doesn't work for you, then go back to the nearest outpost and see if anybody else is recruiting for something around your area.
Now,
and we also have to think about the fact, real quick, John, and then I'll shut up.
Yep.
We also have to think about the fact that a lot of players, because of the way we're designing this caravan system, I may be overthinking the issues related to the bulletin board system, because caravans are already going to provide players with a quote-unquote fast travel option. But we also have to face the reality that not everyone is going to be part of an 8-man group. You're going to have a lot of people who are middle-of-the-road players who are not social butterflies, and they just want to log in 30 minutes here and there, or an hour and a half. Maybe they've got 30 minutes Monday, an hour and a half Friday, and then they only have one day a week that they can play 3 hours. What do we do for those players in terms of this bulletin board system, and how do we give them access to a speedy means of getting to a dungeon entrance?
So if we already have a caravan idea, I mean, I think thematically it should be very similar. If people are used to the caravan, so we can look at it from two different ways. People are in a caravan, they're used to this teleport system, or maybe they want to end up joining a caravan because they've experienced this quote-unquote type teleport system elsewhere. So I think they should be very similar if they're going to have similar functionality, at least in how they're used and how they're presented to the player. So there's parallels between it. You have your caravan that looks like just like, oh, this is my group, whatever we want to call it or do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Robert brings out a very good point. We need to make this travel system work within the vision of our game and how it operates. It needs to make sense for the player and for the world. We already have things in our game, the ideas that we have, that we could work this into. Relics, for example, you talked about, Tim, the wizard spires, and then maybe having a certain number of charges. Maybe after, maybe they're just a giant relic, and after so many uses, they are uncharged, and you have to take a piece, like a guild has to take a piece, like a console part or a relic out of this spire and go recharge it, like for the good of
bringing items to it as like a public.
Right. But like it has to work in our game. Like we have the ability to go do a raid to recharge relics. Like this big wizard spire, it'll work. Like you can do a fast travel to this wizard spire, but it'll run out, and the server has to deal with making that available.
So I just had this crazy idea as I was sitting here. Go ahead, John. Sorry, go ahead.
Or, like Richard or Bobby was talking about the caravan thing too. Like it needs to be something that is in line with what we're trying to create. It can't just be, oh, we're this, this type of game, but we're going to throw in this mechanic that kind of like doesn't really make sense with our vision. Like it has to.
So there's two things I can think of off the top of my head. One I don't like. It's the least favorite, but I'm going to mention it right off the bat because it came up during a conversation with myself, Wendy, and Alex probably a year and a half ago, where we talked about having NPC caravans for players who needed to get between one outpost and a city through a dangerous environment. They could basically hail this NPC, and that would start a basically an NPC caravan, but you had to defend that caravan along the way. And if you don't defend it and it fails, you end up back wherever it is where you started. That's my least favorite idea. What I was just thinking about when we were talking about this, looking at the wizard portal, like using that as an example, like maybe there's 4 wizard spires across the world and you can access them from like Fingless Mirror. There's one in Fingless Mirror, there's one in Foreign Mirror, there's one in Whitehall, and maybe we put one somewhere else. So we allow some limited form of getting quickly from point A to point B, but only
we kind of have to.
We do. No, we do. This is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. But what I'm thinking about is how we do this is, we were just talking about recharging, and I was thinking that a great way to be able to do this would be, say, here's these items, here's these spires. They have limited charges on them, so players can only use them X amount of times before they just shut down. So maybe we make it to where people have to basically sacrifice relic items to these spires to therefore take the charge out of the relic items.
So
and
this
put
is
that charge into.
I like that idea a lot, because what happened, like, for instance, something that Shroud of the Avatar just implemented, they have these artifact items in their game, which are kind of like our relic items. They're like special things that have special powers, and they're making them so you can like recharge them or something. But in order to recharge them, you have to basically sacrifice yourself and pay a price of death. You don't actually die, but you pay the death penalty in regards to like your skills. You lose experience and stuff like that. So that's actually a great idea. The question is, how do we discharge, if we go along with that, how do we discharge these spires? Because we can't say it's based on usage, because that means it's only going to be the rich and powerful who had enough time to get there. It would have to be like maybe like time-based or something like that,
Yeah, we could put it on a timer.
Yeah, I mean, the other option is like, and I hate to be going back to Shroud, but they also have this like Moongate system that no one really uses. But they have these Moongates around the world that are kind of like wizard spires, and then at certain times, like 2 of them.
Like a bus system.
What's that? A what system?
Like a bus system.
I guess, but like at certain times that like based on the astronomy events or something, and obviously with ours it would be like rune power, where like 2 of them light up and you can travel between these 2 places through the gate or whatever at certain for an hour at this time.
Oh man, I really like that idea.
And then like other ones, it's like that one shuts down and other ones turn up, but that doesn't solve the problem of like I need to go there now. So yeah. I think if we come up with some interesting way to do both of those things, that might be cool.
Okay.
Or
yeah, because
similar type things.
I'm less worried about the players who are going to be like us, who play 2 or 3 nights a week. We play 2 to 3 hour sessions each time. We have our caravan, we have our guild. We're out there doing stuff. I'm more worried about the middle of the road players, the antisocial players, the introverts who aren't necessarily the social butterflies. How do we take them and put them in a tavern environment and say, okay, now you've got a group. How do you get to that group? Assuming that, like, let's say, and this is something else we haven't even talked about, if someone has posted something in that bulletin board, do they still need to be at the tavern to answer replies to that bulletin board, or are they going to get a message when they're out in the field that's, hey, someone just replied, send them a tell? How do we deal with that in terms of, somebody put a notice up 3 hours ago and then they went off and they went out adventuring and they're out in the field and they've still got room for 2. How do we do that?
That's a good question.
Joining the group from the bulletin board, it's like a group entry. Either you need to send, it needs to be an invite to that, or you set it in a way that, hey, we need this member, we not using these parameters.
Well, hey, so
they click on it and say join, and then you see somebody pop into your group, and then you talk to them.
Well, so we have our mail system is going to be carrier pigeon based, right?
Right.
So
that's a good idea.
When someone responds to a group thing or something, a fucking pigeon shows up. It's fine. You can get a mail message. You just can't say send a mail message from out of nowhere, but you can receive it. So you receive a mail message, say, hey, these people are interested in grouping with you or something, and then then you can send them a message directly.
Why not? I kind of like the other idea better.
Which one?
Where so the leader of the group posts on a bulletin board he needs 3 people, and then when somebody sees it on the bulletin board, they can just
click join.
board. Because once you join a group, you can be able to group chat with them anyways.
Well, right, but how does that work the other way when the person
Maybe
is saying,
the other
"I
way.
need a group," you know, and
You'll
then
go
the
to the
group?
bulletin board.
Well, no, I'm saying, and he's going out and doing something, and then the group leader goes into the tavern to post his notice, and he's like, "Oh, wait, this guy's looking for a group." We got to accommodate both directions. I understand what you're saying, and yeah, that's fine, no problem. You know,
Then it would just be the same as invite. So if I'm a group leader and I got 3 spaces and I'm the one looking at the bulletin board and I see someone else who says for a group today, I can right click that and join them to the group.
Well, one of them has a button that says join, and the other has a button that says invite, which means you already have a group and that person's looking, and you click that button and it pulls them into your group.
Yeah.
Here's the other
And
question
once
I
they're in a
have.
group, or unless they decline, then it puts it back on.
well, I mean, Tim, you had a
So-
couple things you wanted to hit on, right? I mean, one of them was fast travel. I'm not sure what the other ones are, but let's rein it back into fast travel.
Yeah, so I'm thinking
we don't even have our
mind.
group stuff figured out yet exactly. So
Right. So the other
Let's
thing
come
I'm
back to
thinking
that.
about too, maybe I'm over analyzing this, because we also have to consider the fact that our bulletin boards are local. So when we say local, we're talking Fingless Mirror and the 4 zones directly around it. And then by the time you get to 2 zones over, there's an outpost, and then it's the 3 zones around there. So I could be looking at this completely wrong, and it could be an issue that isn't even going to be an issue in our game, because a lot of people are making the assumption that when they come to the bulletin board, they're going to be signing up for a group that could be 6 zones away all the way across the other side of the world, and that's not going to be the case because we're talking about local bulletin boards. So I could be overanalyzing this. Just some things I wanted to talk about. I think we're pretty much fine that we can brainstorm a little bit with this stuff and come back to this at one of our future meetings. I think we've come up with some good discussion points.
well, I mean, let's summarize then real quick on the fast travel options, because we were talking about, I think, 2 different kind of things. Like, one is like fast travel across the world, and the other is like, how do you get to a group? So are we kind of thinking that screw the like teleport directly to your group thing,
Yeah, I don't think
more or
that's
less
really
like just
I don't think that's gonna be
strategic points of teleportation to where
Yes.
and
That
I mean,
makes
that's
more
essentially
sense
what
in our game.
EverQuest did, but we need to open it up more to like, you need a druid. Like that as cool as that is, like, it's going to breed frustration, and we need to find a way for them to be able to use those things on their own if they need, or figure something out.
Right. So with the
I know you
wizard,
said having scholar or something, but like, I don't know.
And I
mean-
think it.
you could set up an NPC in the town with, like, there's 2 parts of the relic. There's the wizard spire, that's a giant relic portal thing, and then the NPC in town has the other part that activates it, or something like that. So you go to this NPC and say, I want to be sent here, and the NPC sends
I
you.
think the
But
really
it's not- yeah.
in my mind, the best way to do that, in my mind, if we're going to have it accessible to everyone, and we're not going to tie it to like a scholar, I think that then we need to make the recharging of these things a global. So here would be my suggestion. Like, we were talking about time-based, like doing a cycle. What if we did something where the game launches and there is they find these portals, and an NPC tells them that these are ancient transportation devices that no longer work. Perhaps if they were ever to regain a charge, and then that would unlock a global quest. And by global quest, I mean like an actual world event where the players as a community have to come together to meet the criteria, to recharge this item, or however we decide to make that work. Then it becomes available. Once the server comes together, they unlock this thing, then everyone can access that portal system for X amount of months, for example. Maybe we make it for 3 months. Then it runs out of charges. And then we come up with another event that they have to do to recharge it for the next time, and we have it where it's a server event. And in a server event, it's not that like, let's say I don't have time to play and I don't get to participate. It doesn't really matter because the rest of the server will be participating, and there will be the guilds out there that are doing it to make it available to everyone on the server. And we could just look at cycling that. We could come up with a different reason every time, or we could just make it related to, you know, you've got to complete this many, you've got to sacrifice this many items to it, but it's the server as a whole contributing to that, not just individuals. I don't know. It's just something off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that makes sense with the spirit of our game. So
the other issue with I think we're overthinking the whole transport to the dungeon entrance, because all of our community bulletin boards are going to be local anyway. So it's not like people are going to have to be talking about, you know, traveling an hour and a half away to go to the dungeon entrance. It's going to be, hey, I'm in this outpost.
Well, right, but that's
for
the bulletin
something
boards. That doesn't do anything for like friends. Like you log in, your friends are over there or something like that. So there's multiple angles we need to cover it at. Like, yes, I agree. It should be relatively local, but you know, you log in, you're like, hey, we just came to this new place. It's fucking cool. Come see us. Like, we need to be able to figure out how to help that as well.
Yeah, and we might be able to tie that to, well, not everybody's going to be a part of the guild is the problem.
Right, and we can't make those assumptions.
No,
I think if we spread out these spires or whatever we decide it's going to be to certain spots, you know, strategically, and we make it, you know, like, okay, you don't have to run for an hour and a half. You just, you know, you run for 15 minutes or whatever it is. They should still have to work to get to their friends. You know, it shouldn't just be yeah.
And eventually players will be getting relics that allow them speed buffs. They'll have mounts that allow them to run faster, so on and so forth. But I think the best solution for right now is we can look at strategically placing these teleporters in 4 or 5 places around the world. Make them limited charges for now. But here's the other issue I have with that. What happens when we turn magic back on in Volume 2? Now suddenly we have these transportation devices that are always on. Is that an issue, or is that just, you know, because at some point people are going to look at that and say, well, now you've trivialized travel. But I also think that that's part of the necessary evolution of the game, is that now we've bought magic back, there should be some level of convenience associated with that, because now you're more powerful. The whole community is more powerful. The whole world is more powerful now that magic is back. Anyway, so let's kind of, I think that's a good summary for that point. We could talk, just be brainstorming about that, and we'll come back.
What if we also did like a, like, because we want to, I don't know how dickish it would be, but the dick part of me says, what if we apply like a debuff if they use one of these wizard spires for like an hour? I mean, you know, like do something dickish just to like kind of discourage it, but if they need to use it, they can. I don't know, but that's kind of a dick move, I think, maybe.
Yeah, that might discourage that middle of the road.
Yeah,
I love it, to be honest. I love it.
Just make it use 90% of their health.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so they come out, they're 10%, so they better have
it,
enough time to sit there and.
Rather than be health, I think it would be better if we tied that. If we were to run with that, I would rather tie that to their relic items that they have. Like, it drains your charges when you use it. So anybody who wants to use the system, it's going to take charges to teleport you somewhere.
Some people might not have relics, though.
And then they keep the system, that would be the downside to that.
Yeah, because then no one would get to use it until they got higher up. So I think some sort of like cycling system or something, maybe. I don't know. We'll figure.
I'd like to
out.
tie it. I do like the cycle system, and I definitely want to tie it to like world events where the community has to come together as a whole to make this thing work and then to recharge it. So we can think about creative ways to approach that solution as we get closer to that. Next item on my agenda is, all right, we've been very adamant, and I'm not stepping away from that fact that we don't have many maps, but we have often talked about things like cartography or player-drawn maps, whether they are correct or false, whether someone gives you a fake map or not, that's something else. Some people have suggested Fog of War. I don't think Fog of War applies to us because a Fog of War assumes that we're then going to give them a mini-map once they've uncovered all of the Fog of War, and I don't want players to have mini maps because that's been a core design concept. Is you need to pay attention to the world, you need to learn the zones, you need to figure out how to get from point A to point B. That being said, a lot of people have made commentary about wanting to see some sort of in-game maps. Someone brought up the treasure maps from Elder Scrolls Online. They were a great concept in the beginning, and if you've never played Elder Scrolls Online, the way these treasure maps work is you find them, you open it up, and it pops up this in-game map, and it's basically just a sketch of, it might be a waterfall. It just shows you like a sketch of a waterfall between two trees and a little river, but it doesn't tell you where in the zone that waterfall is, or where in, not necessarily the zone, but where in the world area. So that world area could be made
Those
up.
treasure maps are so hard.
3 zones. Yeah, they're really difficult to figure out. But then someone, because Elder Scrolls Online allows add-ons, somebody came up with an add-on that takes a screenshot of that and then figures out where in the zone it is and then puts an X on your map so you can very quickly run straight to that, which is not what I want to do. But I like the idea of looking at treasure maps, sketches, but then also looking at, we've talked a lot about cartography. How do we realistically approach cartography as a mastery, as a skill system? How do we realistically approach player-created maps? Or is that something that is going to be out of our capabilities and we just need to do treasure maps or vendor sold maps? Like you get to a certain faction point or you find this random merchant somewhere and he has a map of this zone and you can open up that map and it just shows you a very rough sketch of that zone.
Realistically, that would probably be the lowest hanging fruit. It would still require artist time to actually construct the map.
Right.
I mean, because there's awesome things I'd love to be able to do. Like there's this game made by 2 brothers called Miasmata, which is basically you're on an island trying to cure a disease that you have, and there's this monster hunting you the whole time. But the whole like crux of the game is mapping the island. So like you basically have to pull up a map and then look at a landmark, and then you have to like go to a different part and then look at the same landmark, and it triangulates its position and basically reveals everything in between those 2 points. That like it was a really cool system and it was really rewarding to do, and I would love to do something like that, but if we're being honest, then it ain't gonna happen.
Right. I also think a low-hanging fruit would be to just put in some sort of like, how we're gonna have like a journal where you can take notes. Like why not put in a
tab for maps?
Right, like a tab for maps, but also like it's a blank page. They can use basically like paint. They can like just draw lines.
Yeah, that's not a low-hanging fruit.
No,
it's not. Okay.
Dang it. The way to do that, I think, would be like you have. I don't know how we would do this. I think the easiest solution for us is to have. Yes, we're going to have to invest in artists. We definitely need to have city maps for Finglas Mirror, Whitehall. So they go to a vendor, they purchase the map. So we have to invest some art assets in someone create. Which, to be realistic, that's probably going to end up being me because I'm going to be the one doing the initial layout on all these cities.
That's not terrible because ideally, like if we design it in the game and then we just take an overhead screenshot and we, use that as a backdrop in Photoshop and then we get some tiled assets. Like it doesn't have to be hand drawn. We can, we can get, that's how they make maps.
Well, that solves for the cities, but in terms of zones. Obviously we don't want every zone to have that kind of stuff, but it would be, I think, kind of cool if maybe you get to an outpost and you find the cartographer Jim and you hail him and he's got 6 maps available and they cost a shitload of money. But if you buy them, then it'll show you, like, it'll give you an overview of a specific zone. However, here's the flip side to that. The moment that happens, someone's going to take a screenshot of that and they're going to put it on a wiki. And then it's going to be available on a wiki somewhere.
But it's not going to be much difference than the binder of EverQuest maps I have on my bookshelf that were printed out from EQ Maps. Like it's not going to be that much different. They're all drawn by hand and somebody did them, but like there they are, you know, like, and I'd open that binder all the fucking time because I was lost.
Well, and the flip side of this too is that we are also talking about going in and manually or dynamically, however we decide to do that, moving NPCs from time to time so that Ranger Bob's not always in the same place. So even if a map does get stuck up on a wiki, and the maps that these vendors are going to be selling aren't going to show POIs. It's just going to be, here's a map of the zone, and it just shows, you know, here's the entrance, here's the exit, here's a lake, here's a cave, but it doesn't have, you know, entrance to Dungeon of Blah on it. So I don't know. I think that that's probably the easiest solution, because I think cartography as a mastery is great to talk about, but I don't see us realistically being able to include that in any aspect of Volume 1. I think that would be something that maybe we can include in Volume 2 when we've got more resources and et cetera to work on it. Anybody have any other things they can think about in terms of the vendor maps?
I mean, I like Richard or Bobby's idea. Like, if you just zone out, take a picture, and then make it into a map, be able to sell these in some sort of way, whether it's an unlock, like your guild can unlock it, or like a cartographer mastery person can unlock it and like understand it, or something where it's like you still have to do the work to be able to get the maps, but once you have them,
the only issue I ever see with that, and I keep coming back to that, is what do we do? So player A goes and spends, whether it's a shitload of gold, or he grinds a lot of faction, or he does whatever it is that we put in place to make it difficult for him to get those player maps. Maybe that player is like me and says, fuck the rest of the world, I'm going to keep those maps for myself, I don't want anyone else to have them. But maybe that player decides to stick them up on a wiki. It's now become irrelevant for anybody else who comes and does that, because they don't, why go do that quest if I could just go to a website and print the map out and have it?
You're not going to be able to stop people from putting stuff on a wiki.
No, I know. I'm just.
And I think there are going to be, there will be plenty of people that would rather do the quest than look at a wiki.
I mean, we could even do a thing where, you know, it's simply like they have to go to, well, that still doesn't fix the problem, but like they have to go to the NPC. Like, it's the NPC's map. They worked hard on it to make it. Like, they're the cartographer. They get to go and look at it for as long as they want, but they can't take it with them. Or maybe only scholars.
If you do something like that, then they're absolutely going to take a screenshot of it and use that only.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
or maybe
I think maps are like one of the least of our concerns right now. I don't think we need like I'm okay with launching with very little maps, except for like maybe hand-drawn city maps, you know, and let the community take care of the rest. If they're gonna make wikis and all that shit, just let them make it.
The hand-drawn EQ maps, like.
Dude, I made maps, paper and pencil, so much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that. Let's just go ahead and shelve this discussion for now. City maps only. Let's let the community worry about the rest of it.
Because they're gonna do it regardless. You know?
Right.
Because there's no way for us to realistically. Yeah, there's no way for us to realistically
write a map. Somebody's gonna make a page. It's.
I can't believe a map hasn't surfaced on some wiki right now of the zones we have.
Yeah, me too.
Well, all you gotta do is give Tim a screenshot of the zone, and he'll be like, "Oh, look at this, guys!" Just tweet the shit out.
Suck it. Okay. So everybody just be keeping in the back of your minds in terms of the Transportation Spire stuff, and we'll address this here in a couple of weeks after we've brainstormed a little bit about it. I think those are really the only two things that I wanted to really talk about tonight. Just because I want to address just how do we get the middle of the road players to come play. Because, you know, if we've got X amount of pre-orders, we keep bringing people in, and that's great. But here's the realistic thing. I've published 4 of those posts they've been seen. Just our own website in and of itself has probably brought in. I'm not looking at traffic right now, but I know each post has brought in probably 1,500 to 2,000 views per post. So let's say it's 2,000. That's 8,000 views, plus the videos / audios have brought in 1,000 views. That's just on our end. Let's say 10,000 views, and I know that those all those articles are generating hundreds of comments.
Yeah, and I mean, your point
not
is
all of negative.
Like, we're not going to get everybody, but if we're just throwing people away for no reason, then that's stupid.
There's this, and I'm telling you right now, we're throwing people away because we've had a boatload of people who are not coming on board because we haven't showed any third person, and we haven't, and we're coming off as extremely hardcore, which technically we are, but we're technically not as hardcore as these outlets are making us look. So what I was trying to portray here is we've seen 10,000 views. Those websites have probably seen 50,000 views, if you want to be realistic about how traffic works. And we've had 3 pre-orders. Now, granted, one of them was a $2,500 pre-order. We've had 3 pre-orders this month. So I think we've had maybe 15 pre-orders out of 50,000 views. That is not an acceptable conversion rate in my mind. We would have a lot more sales if we had the third person in, if we had something where we could placate the people in terms of travel, etc.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you're going to do with this third person?
So the way it's supposed to work, and I don't know how we're going to do this completely yet, but it's if you're an intelligence-based character and you choose this astral projection mastery, then you can have an out-of-body experience, and you can project your mind out of your body. In the earliest stages of that, I've always conceptualized this as, okay, I can scroll out 10 feet for 10 seconds, and if I get hit, I get interrupted, and I'm back in first person. And I can't use it again for another 5 minutes.
So it's only out of combat and that kind of stuff?
For in the beginning stages, but as you level that mastery up, and you get to, say, level 50, now I can go out 50 feet, I can go out for 5 minutes, I can get hit a few times, it doesn't get interrupted, etc. And then once I've taken that all the way to 100, let's assume I have 20 intelligence, and I take that mastery all the way to 100, then I should have third person on demand. So I can just go out in third person whenever I want.
Didn't we say that we were going to do something similar with a perception-based character as well?
There's 2 versions. One is intelligence, the other one is perception.
Right. Okay. So it's really less limited than people think. Like if people want to be a ranger and have perception, they can do that.
But we haven't shown it yet, and that's the big issue because all we've done for the past 3 years of videos is showed first person. So the perception of the general public is that we are a first person only game, and that's turned away a lot of sales, thousands of dollars of pre-orders. So that concerns me. That's probably my number one concern moving into next year is getting that implemented. Even if it's just the fundamental, like no time limit associated with it, you could just go out in third person, and it has a skill associated with it. Whatever. But having that ability in there so we can go do a video and be like, hey guys, we've got a third person working now. That's going to do a lot to placate people who were on the fence or just said that they weren't going to buy it.
I don't know why people thought that we were going to, I mean, obviously we've said that we're going to be primarily first person, but we've never ever said that we aren't going to have any.
We've never said that. The blog post that I made 3 years ago specifically says that we're going to have a third person ability, and it's said that for 3 years. We have never said that we're first person, but because media outlets like Massively and MMORPG.com, they pick up something, and these fucking editors who don't know how to, they're not journalists, they're just fucking bloggers, really shitty bloggers, to be honest with you. They literally will pick apart what they think is the relevant component and then post this expose on their website. And that's how we've suddenly become this hardcore MMORPG that's only first person. And, it's, I mean, you guys have all seen, like, Agilist keeps joking about it in Discord, like the sarcastic remark or the sarcastic commentary that one guy wrote about us. It's just, it is what it is. I don't know why. I really don't know why, because we've never said that, but that's just the perception, and we need to change that quickly.
And I think a lot of people are mistaking like old school style for hardcore, which it's not. It's just a play style preference.
They're mistaking group-based for hardcore. That's
Yeah.
what it's coming down to. They're saying, "Oh, I have to group with other people. I can't solo." That's
Right,
too
that's
hardcore
exactly.
for me.
As long as we stick towards that, I don't mind bending in other ways because I think we can do a lot of different stuff that makes it easier for the players that could still be cool and fit in line with what we're doing lore-wise, and we can get creative. But us sticking to the fact that group content, exploring, camping, grinding, whatever you do, it's fun and it's memorable. And that is our core. We have unique, specialized characters coming together to form a competent body. And anything else around that is all supplementary because that's the real meat and that's what's going to keep people in front of the computer for hours. So I am not going to be, one of the people, a stickler anymore, trying to cling to these ideas that can't be changed. And I think that we have a lot of smart people here that we can figure out ways to make this fun and enjoyable, still stick to our guns, and show people that this is approachable. We're not making a game that's meant to be unapproachable.
On a side note, we're a ways away from developing anything around this bulletin board system, but I'm assuming that we're going to farm this out in terms of the app that we do, or is that something that you guys are going to want to take on internally?
You mean like a mobile app?
Yeah.
I think we would probably want to farm that out.
Okay. I mean, we don't need to approach it right now, but I'm just, if I need to think ahead for this, and I'll need to realistically look at what it costs to develop an app.
Is it
budget some money aside for it?
Is it possible for the app to be a more global tool rather than just local? Because how are we going to say like, okay, well because people want to use the app to say, okay, I've got a group, so now when I log in, I can just go get together with my group and we can start adventuring.
I think in my mind, the way the app would need to work is when you access the map. When you access the app, you can see the world map, and you can pick maybe whatever cities or outposts you've already visited, and go just at the click of a button. You can go to the local bulletin boards for each one of those cities or outposts
with your game account too.
Provided
what we should, and it'll know like where are you at, where's your character at, or where are you near, or there should also be ways to chat with people. Like an OOC chat that you can get to in certain regions or whatever, and make sure that you can discuss with people what you're doing. Hey, I'll be home in 30 minutes. What can we do? Can we do this? I mean,
we also have to think about the fact that Discord may be the solution to our problems, because Discord is, I mean, you guys are already implementing that to a greater degree in Shroud, and I know everybody out there Discord is everywhere. It's overlaid on almost every single game now. Very few people are this was something that came up the other day, is how much are people going to realistically use chat in the game when they've already got their community of people on Discord? It's a good question, especially when we start talking about these streamers who have their own communities of people. It's very unlikely that they're going to be using in-game chat to communicate with people. They're going to be using Discord chat and talking with their existing communities. So, that's a bridge that we may have to cross as well.
Let's work with Discord. Everybody loves Discord.
Another thing too is this bulletin board mobile app. I think it would probably make more sense to just do it as a web-based thing and not necessarily in that mobile app. It would be cheaper, be easier to implement. Because when you start talking about mobile apps, you're going to have to find someone who can develop it for both iOS and Android.
This is true.
And that can start getting expensive.
Yeah, then we start getting into a $20,000, $30,000
But if you just make it a website, then you don't need an app at all. because every cell
That is
phone
very-
has a browser.
Can we
Sure.
make the website app friendly? Or I mean
Of
mobile
course.
friendly?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, you would do it with an HTML5 kind of standard mobile/desktop layout.
Perfect.
Okay. I think I like that idea. So we can. I mean, it's not something we don't have to make that decision now. But I'm just thinking in the back of my
Right.
mind, if I need to set aside $10,000 to cover the development of something in regards to this, then I need to go ahead and earmark that money now to make sure that it's set aside for when we need it. Obviously, I think it's a little early, but that's how my mind is working. So.
I don't even know if that's necessarily something we would need for an MVP. I would.
Maybe not in the early stages because everybody's going to be logging in during those early months.
What I'm getting at is, I mean, that's something I could easily build,
Okay.
but I wouldn't want to dedicate time to it until we have an MVP.
All right. Let me put this down. Maybe. Okay. Well, let's table that for now. That might be the better solution. Is just say we can make the assumption that there's going to be enough people playing during the early stages of the game that we probably don't need that app, and then you could be maybe working on that post-launch.
That might even be something that we could market to. Because you know how it goes. When a game first releases, you'll have your hump of sales, and then it'll go down a little bit. Well, that first initial dip, that might be something we might be able to use to bring people back as well as new players.
Well, this is something which I think we talked about this in one of our previous meetings, and I took a shitload of notes when we were at the Austin Game Conference because that one place I went to, where they were talking about it was the EverQuest people, it was Daybreak people, and the people who publish Archage. I think it's Trion Games, and there was a panel of 4 of them, and they were talking about longevity and like how to keep people coming back. And we've talked about this internally before about doing our you have your monthly subscription and then you earn these in-game coins that you can then use at like an in-game, it's a coin, but instead of it being a cash shop, it's a coin shop. And the only way you can earn the coins is by paying a monthly subscription. That's one way to keep people paying that monthly subscription. But then we also have to have things realistically every 3 months. We need to be pushing something out there in terms of a patch or some sort of an update that keeps adding new features and new content to the game, so we keep giving people a reason if they've maybe slipped away for the last 3 weeks. So that's a good point. That's something more for a future conversation, but that is.
No one does GM events anymore like Asheron's Call used to do, like a GM.
No, we've talked about that a lot.
That's going to be a huge part of it.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, about using GM events and world events for our game to keep the community going, and I think that that's a great first step. Because
to be honest, I'm going to be writing quests for zones and stuff, but like we have dungeons in the game, I'm probably going to be writing new quests for dungeons, and those will come in so like people know the dungeons, and then they'll be like, oh, there's a new quest in this dungeon, like let's go check it out, So I don't expect to have quests written for dungeons. There will be quests involving dungeons, but no like quest lines specific to dungeons probably at launch.
all right.
So yeah. There's going to be plenty of content we can push every few months.
All right. Well, let's table this for now. We'll meet up again probably next week. We're going to be testing on Monday nights. Does Thursday night work for everybody on a general basis?
Yeah.
I'm hearing one yes. Is that good for everybody?
Fine.
I can't predict the future, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, let's just do it on a case-by-case basis. We'll ping everybody and we'll see if next Thursday works. Try to do these once a week. That's it for this one.